I saw this morning that Oura raised a Series E round. So they raised $875 million at a $11 billion valuation. They've sold over 5 million rings, and they expect over $1 billion in revenue this year. I just thought this was interesting because of just where we're at with wearable tech these days. My instincts were, are people even still buying wearable devices? I mean, they are, right?
The Apple Watch, right?
The Apple Watch, right? But I think what's
Actually, the one that's
interesting,
coming in that I think is a wearable that we don't really count as one is the AirPods.
uh,
A lot of people use them.
the IDC expects, which is kind of, one of those research firms, it's case they're often cited by the wearable industry themselves when they talk about their news. But the IDC expects growth in wearable tech to slow this year to about 4%, just because the idea that a lot of these categories are hitting maturity or saturation. But it's also hard to compare Oura with like Apple Watch and Fitbit, for instance, because Oura it's a wearable ring. It's not a watch. When these industry firms are reporting on market share and things like that, they're not really pitting Oura against Apple Watch, right? It's Oura versus other smart rings. I can't even name another
Interesting. I'm
smart
like,
ring
what other smart
brand.
rings are there?
I don't even know, right? But they do have like 80% of that market share. So that's interesting. That's like
Yeah.
they technically don't, at least on a research and analytics watchdog point of view, they don't compete with the Fitbits and the Apple Watches and the Garmins. They're just smart rings. But I don't know. I think I'm also bringing this up because what I think is interesting is, like I was saying, are people still buying wearable tech? Do people still need this? It's kind of interesting that they haven't gone public yet. It's like, why do you keep raising rounds of funding? Like now it's Series E. And
Yeah.
how are you at an $11 billion valuation? Like that's kind of wild to me, to be honest. I think especially because, and I say this as a former Aura user, I had two generations of rings. I used it for several years. And the thing that was the most frustrating for me was the complete lack of insights or health insights for women. It was only 2 years ago that they finally launched period tracking, which I think is absurd.
Yeah,
They
that's
had
wild.
this device out for 7 years. Like 7 years, they were fully detecting when people were about to get sick. They were detecting like based on body like basal temperature, like if you were going to get a fever, if you were starting to feel under the weather, they would know, right? Like a day in advance if whether or not you would get sick, but they still couldn't track periods until until fall of 2023. Like that's really funny to me. That kind of made me realize as I was thinking about wearable tech is how not that useful it is, I think, for most women, in a way that's like if you as a woman are looking for insights specific to you, like whether it is because of your menstrual cycle
Yeah.
or something else, like it's all kind of just like the same. Hope for these things to actually innovate and like give people the information that they wouldn't otherwise have. But so far, it's all just kind of like heart rate, which is useful when you're working out. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is useful to know that, but
That's interesting because it's not even just period tracking, right? It's like, what about like fertility tracking? I mean, you mentioned the basal, temperature, and that's a huge thing of like how you can recognize whether you're ovulating or whether you're, not. What seems to have happened is now there's just a bunch of small products that do one functionality, which is you have the period tracker, and then you have the fertility tracker, and then you have the menopause tracker, and then, so it's like women's health and like tracking seems to have like all these products that you're supposed to use that don't interact together or like work with each other. And the main ones that you would want to have the Apple Watch and Apple Watch does have period tracking, but you kind of have to like log that in yourself. It's not actually, doing it with you. Don't actually have these basic baseline, health things that women, most women face, right? Which is kind of dumb. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like, what's the point if you're not going to give me this huge facet of like data that is actually relevant to me and like my health,
yeah. So like I stopped using like all this wearable tech. Like I just have an app on my phone now to track some interval training workouts. So like that's just time. So that is just that. And as far as period tracking goes, I downloaded the Stardust app because,
Mm,
like, a friend was like, "Oh, this is really funny, like, you'll get some it'll help you track your period." So I thought I would try it for a while, and it is kind of funny to check in with it and see what it says and to see, in general, like, what are some common symptoms based on where I'm at in my cycle, so that's
mhm.
kind of interesting. What it boils down to is I just track my period in my Google Calendar.
Yeah.
Like, that's just where I put it. Like, I
Yeah.
log it when I get it so that I can figure out when the next one is coming or
Mhm,
so that I have a sense of it. I just have it as, like, a recurring monthly thing.
mhm.
And so, in any given week, if I see it on my calendar, like, "Oh, period's starting this week," I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'll probably get it, like, later this week." Like, that is still more useful to me than any of these apps. So, I
Imagine
think
that, just a calendar invite.
what is it? There was like a funny tweet from a long time ago that was
Yeah.
like most B2B companies are competing with someone's spreadsheet.
Mhm.
For
Oh,
me,
yeah.
all these period tracking apps are competing with my Google Calendar.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
I think my
funny.
overall takeaway for this is, you know what, if you are in the health tech space or no, maybe even just more broadly than that, like just I don't know. I mean, you can build whatever you want, right? But
But you're
make
missing on a
things
huge audience. Hello. Women are the ones that have like money to spend and actively spend on these types of products. Lifestyle products are like a huge thing for women. So the fact that they don't do that. But this also reminds me of the Whoop, bracelet. There was an article that like went viral and then they promoted it as a case study and everything, which I thought was like hilarious of how one woman who like she was like some sort of like competitive athlete and she got pregnant and continued using the Whoop through the pregnancy. But all of a sudden, all the readings were off because now her heart rate is higher. Her blood, like all the things that happened during pregnancy were now, showing her that her body was like wrong, and it's like because it's not adjusted to being pregnant, which is crazy. And then she wanted to log the whole process of like childbirth. And obviously the Whoop doesn't have that option to count the the heart rate and all that for a workout, right? So she created her own like custom one, to do that, to kind of like log how much physical effort went into childbirth. And, she talks about like the case study and everything. And I thought like, this is wild. It's like, I do wonder if since then they have changed anything, or just continue to use it as a case study that's on their, testimonials page or whatever.
That's sort of funny. I feel like on one hand, that's really impressive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is very impressive, but
Hmm.
I think what's funny about that is that only highlights to me all of these devices' shortcomings.
Right.
And
That's
I
like,
get
and I
it. Like,
thought,
I understand though that like people aren't typically giving birth every year, so
hmm
it's not common in that
hmm
regard. Like, it's not a frequent activity for for most people.
but
So I
enough
get it,
women do it
but
every year that there should
yeah,
be at least a program that, you could, opt into when it happens to you, right?
right,
I think for me, it was one of those things where it's like, showing like, oh, like a new creative way that someone used our product,
yeah,
and it's like, oh, baseline thing that a lot of women go through every year,
yeah.
that like should be part of the experience because it's such a huge thing, right? And not even just the childbirth, but like going through pregnancy itself. If there was a way for you to keep track of like how, whether you're, baseline okay, like that could help a lot of women and inform the decisions that they're making and like, what they're doing on a daily basis. Like that could be very useful. And the fact that they don't like is a huge miss, for me.
Yeah, big takeaway for me is make products that solve people's
Yeah.
problems. Make things that people need, and then they'll buy them from you.